All right, everyone, welcome back. It is 12:30, and I guess I'm the next one presenting, so I'll do the quick introduction, and then I'll head on to teaching you a bit about pond dipping. So welcome to those just joining us to the Get Outside Earth Day event. I want to acknowledge that Regina is on the traditional lands referred to as Treaty 4 territory, the original lands of the Nahiawak or Cree, the Anishinaapiaq or Saulteaux, Dakota, Nakota, Lakota, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. I've really appreciated all the presentations today. I think it really, for me, has provided a real opportunity to consider the land that we live on and all of the creatures that we share this space with. So thanks so much to all of the presenters. So the virtual event is taking place from 10 a.m. to 1:30. So there's just now my presentation and then a presentation about baby wildlife in spring. The sessions will all be available for viewing on the Nature Regina website after the event. So we invite you to watch the webinar, excuse me, and download the activity and head out in your own neighborhood to try out a self-guided Earth Day activity. Not sure why my voice is failing me right now, but okay, we're excited to bring you this event online. Wild Outside, which is a program through the Canadian Wildlife Federation, the Nature Conservancy of Canada, Nature Saskatchewan, the Saskatchewan Wildlife Federation, and the Royal Saskatchewan Museum all work together to put this event together today. So also a big thank you to the City of Regina who provided funding to make this event possible. So if you have questions, just please feel free to put them in the chat, and I will make an effort to answer them at the end of my session. So the most of the presentation that I'm doing, you'll be able to download after. Let's start my screen share here. All right, so I work with an organization called Nature Regina, and it's a very local grassroots organization, and we really encourage people to get out into nature. We have quite a few programs that have just kind of been developed during the pandemic. If you're looking for, you want to explore somewhere new, we have things called the Get Outside Outdoor Adventure Guides, and they're available on our website. We have a new one every other week right now, and then heading into summer, we'll have a new location every week. You can follow us on social media, and then those are posted every Wednesday. We also have the Get Outside Kids Club. That's happening every Wednesday. We've just moved to online for the next couple of weeks until remote learning with the public schools ends, then we'll go back to in-person. But we've been all year, rain, shine, snow, sleet, exploring and learning in parks and open spaces around Regina. And you can register online for those events on Wednesdays. We are doing online now, which will include a webinar, and then we are setting up scavenger hunts in secret locations around the city, and we provide the location after the webinar. And we also have a series of Get Outside free public events. So there's also speaker topics on nature topics, and I was sharing that Branimir had just done a presentation for us as well on the topic of grasslands and their importance to conservation. And we also usually have field trips led by nature experts, which I'm sure will start up again soon with the weather shifting. So I'm going to teach you about pond dipping, which for me was, this was supposed to be in person. So I'm like, how do you teach pond dipping online? So I'll do my best. My kids, we made some videos and took some pictures. So I hope it'll be, you'll get to see like all the little creatures you can actually see in the ponds and a bit of information. So I'm just going to start quick with a bit of like, so what's actually going on in the waterways, in Regina, because I know for me, for the longest time, I would just kind of go on a walk, see some cattails, and I didn't really think about it much more than that. And it's only recently where I started to notice a little more, and I think COVID provides that opportunity. So Regina is part of the biggest watershed in Saskatchewan, and it's called the Wascana and Upper Capel Watershed, and it's 23,000 plus square kilometers. It's huge. It starts way up at Bruno and goes, you can see on the map there, all the way down to Francis. So all of the water in that system is connected. So what's going on like up north and like throughout that whole entire watershed is connected. So when, you know, if there's a spill, if there's garbage, if there's runoff, it's all kind of filtering through the same water system. So if you want to find out more about our watershed, there is an organization called Water, and their website is just right there on the slide. And you can just kind of take a look and find out a bit more about of the Devonian pathway and, you know, some cattails, which was like about 2 weeks ago, and just kind of just to give you a visual to think a little more about our waterways. So, you know, cattails are a really interesting plant. I didn't really know that much about them, but they have these amazing roots that keep the soil in these waterways in place. So the water, and they do a great job of filtering. They actually clean the water. They have this whole process of cleaning it. So if you know, Saskatchewan is known for having the most pothole wetlands in North America. And those are basically dugouts in farmers' fields, those little areas with a couple of, you know, cattails and a little bit of water. And those are so important for our water system, because they provide an area, obviously, when there's too much water for it to go, so there isn't flooding. And then the runoff coming off of the fields, like from stuff, is actually filtered and cleaned through the cattail. So they provide a really important role for protecting our waterways. They're really smart too. Like the spikes, I'm quite surprised about. They're actually hollow, and they transport air when there isn't a lot of water in a waterway. But when there's a giant flood, they actually open up and they absorb like this massive, massive amount of water. So you can see, yeah, you can see these here. Some pictures of, obviously right now they're just getting started on changing, but this is also, when I would go, there's a couple, I'll share with you the best locations to go pond dipping in Regina, but when I would go into those locations, I'd see green stuff in the water and think, like, I didn't think much about it. And then Gail Fennell is one of our Nature Regina volunteers, and she said, she encouraged me to just stop and like look. And those little green, they're actually these tiny little green pods. They're the smallest plant, the smallest flowering plant that's known. And it's a very important food source for aquatic waterfowl and fish, obviously when there isn't an overabundance of it. But if you go out into parks and open spaces in Regina right now and you look in the water, you're actually going to see duckweed pretty much everywhere that you go. And I would encourage you, when you're in those spaces, like, take a look around, because what food is there available right now for the aquatic waterfowl that are just returning, and the fish that the ice is now melted and they're, you know, getting on reproducing as well. So this, the duckweed is actually a really, really important food source at this time of year. So this is also kind of an interesting thing. Like when you look at, when I took this picture because I look at it and I think, ew, yuck, but there's a lot going on in this picture. The aquatic animals that live in streams, the water is 900 times denser than air. So they have had to adapt in so many different ways to figure out, like, to be able to move through water, which is that dense, and then to become creative and figure out, like, what can we eat and how can we survive? And when there's a predator, how do we escape? And so some of the aquatic animals that I'll show you, we actually have a guide that we created so you can identify what you see. They're just so interesting how they've adapted over thousands of years, basically, to survive in these waterways. So this is the McKell-Wascana Conservation Park, which is probably one of the best places to pond dip. And it's actually where my kids and I went last week and took the videos and the pictures that you guys are going to see. So there's a wiki how, of course, about pond dipping. But I'll kind of go through, like, I know for me, like I thought, ah, no big deal. I know how to do that. But there are some things to really think about when you are pond dipping to make sure that you're keeping the waterway safe and the aquatic animals safe. So I'm going to go through that. So what do you need? Okay, I have my trusty bucket. These buckets, it's white. So when you dip in, you can actually see the animals quite clearly if you have a white bucket. And I purchased it at the dollar store. It's those little dishwashing buckets. And we use it for so much outdoor exploration. I can't even tell you. They're really cheap. I think they're $1.50. You can use a net. You don't have to, but they're quite inexpensive. You can find them at the dollar store. They don't last, but the ones that you can see here that are kind of multicolored, I was able to purchase at Canadian Tire, and the handle stretches out so you can kind of go deep into the into a pond. This is like a more heavy duty, this is our super heavy duty pond dipping net that we purchased from Canadian Tire. They have this stuff as well, but this kind of allowed my kids to stretch out a little further and safely into the pond and see different things. So you can also get these tiny little nets from any like pet store. It's an aquarium net. And so especially little kids, I would encourage you to maybe wrap a piece of string or something around their wrist. So when they're holding on to this, it doesn't drop into the pond, but it's just a great way for them to get really close and kind of scoop out some of the things that they're interested in seeing. And we use a lot of margarine buckets. So just save those up. They're white, so you can see the creatures inside, and yeah, it's a great way to reuse things. We always bring our magnifying glasses, but I don't know, maybe my kids are a bit older, they're not into it. But if these are also from the dollar store, and especially like the flea mites and stuff, to be able to see them closely, if you have a magnifying glass, kids can get really into it. So I think our little pond dipping kit that we made was like $5 or less of materials. The really challenging part that we found, my kids and I, last year, was that there wasn't actually a guide for Regina. So there's guides for other places, but there wasn't one for here. So we actually made our own. And on the Nature Regina website, it's a part of the package of material about pond dipping. And we have it, it's in English, and then we've also translated it into French. And it identifies some of the species that we actually saw in Regina. So we know these ones are here and that you'll actually see them. And instead of having like a diagram, we took pictures of them when we were out on our little pond dipping adventure. So it gives you just a bit of a more realistic view of what the aquatic animals look like. So safety first with pond dipping. Kids get very, very excited. And yeah, they want to crouch or lean out. So I always encourage my children, especially if we're at Mikau-Wascana, lie on your stomach, because I do not want a child falling into the water. And I know when school groups go out there, everyone, that's one of the safety things, is lie on your stomach. I would encourage you, wherever you're pond dipping, kids will forget and they'll get really excited and don't want to have anyone drop into the pond out there. So yeah, that's kind of something you don't really think about. Okay. So I'm going to entice you with what we found. These are only two, but, and for kids too, like to think about, okay, why do you think these little aquatic animals, why did they adapt this way? Like, why are they needing to move like this? So I'm going to show you, it's a very short video, and I hope the volume will work and stuff, we'll see.
Pond dipping at Mikau-Wascana Conservation Park. It's early in April, but the aquatic animals are already hard at work in the water. Look very closely. You can see two different types of beetles. I think that's a water gopher. And the other is a whirligig beetle.
Okay.
I'm dipping at
Sorry, it wants to loop now. We won't do that to you. So you could see some of them, the whirligig beetle has 4 legs and it kind of loops like this in order to move. It's a really interesting one to see. And then the water boatman, it's this tiny little creature. That was the first one that you saw, and it actually eats algae and decaying plant matter on the bottom of the marsh. So it has a really important job. It's this tiny little creature, and there's like probably millions of them in the waterways, and it actually is helping to clean this organic material. So I don't know, my kids get really pumped up about stuff like that. And the whirligig beetle, it has its eyes actually divided, and these facts are on this little guide that we made. It's divided into 2 parts. One can see above the water and the other can see below at the exact same time. And it's like this tiny little creature. So it's just so interesting to consider how they've adapted. So we would really encourage you, like we usually grab our white bucket, we fill it up, and then we place it on a flat surface, and then my kids use the nets and they look for things. And the important movement is to do a figure 8 and just to be gentle. Like kids get really excited, but if they're kind of furiously like going in the water, they're going to scare off the aquatic animals, and they won't actually get to see that much. So it's like just encouraging that slow figure 8 movement. And then just, you know, very gently pull the net out and go gently put what you found into the tray, because you are transporting an aquatic animal from their habitat to take a look at them. So you're visiting. So just, you know, that's what we encourage, is just to be slow and steady. And if you look at what you found with a magnifying glass, or use the ID guides that we have. And so in the package of materials, there is this, you know, this one with pictures, but there's also another guide that's more scientific, and it shows you if it has 2 legs, then it might be these things, and if it has 3, then it might be these, and if it has 4, and then kids can start to, or adults, like just telling you, we did an event with all adults and we had just as much fun as having a bunch of kids there. So it just helps you to start classifying what is in there. So you can, yeah, choose which one you would like to use. And this is another video of what we found. So when I looked out at the pond at Wascana, it's like you don't really realize how clean the water actually is. And it's because the cattails and all these little aquatic animals are cleaning the water, and they're keeping it safe and clean for all the waterfowl and all the fish that also make that place home. So we'll just watch this one.
I'm dipping at Wascana Conservation Park. It's hard to see that all the creatures in there, but you have to look very closely. And there is an amazing number of little aquatic animals swimming around. You really have to come out and try it out on your own. I can see 6 different creatures in here. I basically need a very strong magnifying glass to be able to show that to you right now. It's very cool.
Oh. Okay. So yeah, it's hard to see. There were tiny little fleas, which are, if they're in a certain number in a waterway like a marsh, it's actually a sign of health, because they're going around their roll. They look like a fat little spider, and they're just like microscopic. And I think there were about 15 in that little bucket, but with my phone, you can actually see them. So, and they have a really important role for keeping the waterway clean and healthy. So, and once you're done, this is an important thing that kids kind of forget. You're returning the aquatic animals to their habitat. So just very gently, you know, get very close to the water and pour them back in, because if you are dropping them from a tall height, you could actually injure them. And if you just like chuck your bucket onto the grass or something, then obviously they won't be able to return to the water on their own and survive. Just little things. I know my kids, yeah, the first time out, we did not follow what we should have been doing, but we learned. And we just encourage you, rinse all your equipment once you get home. Make sure that you clean it well, because there are bacteria and things like that in the waterway. You don't want to be bringing that home, or if you go out pond dipping again, you don't want to reintroduce anything into the waterway. So, and what I really love to do is the first time, probably the first few times that we went, was we did our pond dipping and then we stopped and just looked into the water. And before pond dipping, we couldn't see anything. It just looked like a, oh, I don't know, it's yucky pond water, right? And after, we could actually spot like the water boatmen and some of the aquatic animals like doing their thing in the water, because we had just taken a closer look. And I really feel like pond dipping is an activity that really helps connect kids with the interconnectedness of what's around us. And every single time we do pond dipping, there are literally shrieks of delight because when you pull a bucket out of a pond and you see what's in there, it's kind of shocking, actually. The news came out and they did a segment on the Wandering Wednesdays thing that my kids and I do, and I forgot I was mic'd, and we pulled out the bucket, and I was like, oh wow, like, because we actually had our bucket. Even as an adult, for me, you kind of forget yourself, which I find right now is kind of an important experience to have. So yeah, we went. I really appreciate the opportunity to put the presentation together, because we went out there, like pond dipping in April. Pond dipping in April, you'll see some stuff, but if you go in May, June, July, August, it will be amazing to you when the waterway like starts to come to life even more. And my kids, when we left, they're like, "Oh, Mom, that was so fun." And people who know my children I have an almost teenager, 12, almost 13, and 11, and to hear that from an 11 and 13-year-old, yeah, can be rare. So I know it definitely engages them. So where can you pond dip in and around Regina? There's a couple of really cool locations. McKell-Wascana Conservation Park is actually in the East End, and this is what it looks like now, but it's really starting to come to life. When you go there too, if you have binoculars, you want to try out some of the tips that Ryan Fisher was sharing. It's used as like a stopover waterway for migrating waterfowl. So there are just tons of waterfowl that make use of it. So every time that we go out there, we see something new and interesting. It's also used as a nesting area for quite a few birds that are just returning to Regina from migrating. So if you do head out there, if you see the bushes, like you'll think, oh, what is that? Scrub brush. Well, the birds actually use the scrub brush as their nesting grounds because it's protected, and it also has a food source. Usually there's snowberry, or usually wild rose hips are in those little bushes, and that's a food source for their young. So that's a really cool place to check out. There's also the Habitat Conservation Area, and it's in Wascana Park, and not everyone knows about it. It's where Douglas Hill is. There's a parking lot kind of across the street, but it's just below kind of where Douglas Hill is, and it's a fenced in little area, and there is the dock. When the water is high, it's a great place to pond dip, but I'm not sure right now what the water level is. I haven't had a chance to go out there, but you can see they usually do the Wings Over Wascana festival there. And when they offer pond dipping, there's like literally thousands of people that show up to try it out. So it's a great place because it is protected. And it's also a great place. It's an ecosystem, right? It's not just the aquatic animals. There's birds, there's wildlife. At the Habitat Conservation Area, there are actually turtles as well. And now that the ice is gone, they're probably just starting to emerge. And they kind of lay in the afternoon in the sun and warm up on the banks. And it's pretty neat to see that as well. So there's also Condi Nature Refuge. It's about I would say 15 minutes outside of Regina, and there's a place called Bogey Creek. Um, at, yeah, and that's probably one of our favorite. We were out there the one day pond dipping, and we looked across and there was a fawn just sitting in the water, or not in the water, sorry, in the tall grass right beside the water. And it was watching us as we were pond dipping. So you just get this like immersive experience. The Devonian pathway in Regina kind of runs from Les Sherman Park all the way to A.E. Wilson. And people don't really know about it. If you park at the dog park by the airport and then kind of head towards the bridge there, there's some low spots that you can pond dip. And we did see a beaver and a muskrat when we were out there. So, you know, there's lots of wildlife to see. So pretty much, you know, I sometimes even those little yucky places you see that you think, ew, but if you see any waterfowl in those waterways, they are eating something, and it is aquatic animals. So if you want to try out pond dipping in these different places, you're probably going to find you're going to be a little surprised probably by what you find living in these spaces. So yeah, if you see wildlife, there are aquatic animals there. And this was, in the south end, there's kind of a waterway, and yeah, that duck is clearly looking for something to eat. And I watched it for about 10 minutes, and yeah, it was definitely finding things to eat. So yeah, so that is it, I think. I don't know if people, oh, there's some questions or, oh yeah, nice. Okay, so some folks said they found scuds and snails so far this spring. Yeah, and there's lots of snails, which are a really important food source for the, yeah. And then, oh, okay, someone was at Wascana Conservation Area yesterday. Oh, okay, maybe that is referring to the Habitat Conservation Area. No water by the dock yet. So yeah, so don't head out there. But you know what, if you go just kind of down from there, close to the Science Center, there are some areas that get close to the water, and you can probably safely do some pond dipping there as well. So, all right. I think Erin's here somewhere.
I'm here, I'm just hiding.
Okay.
That was awesome. I just wanted to share with you, like, so, and with those attending, before I even started talking to Shannon or met Shannon, I had actually utilized that McKell pond dipping resource and took our Wild Outside group out there. And so even though they're 15 to 18-year-olds, they had an absolute blast. Like, they were so excited. They found snails. We like rescued some recycling out of the tall grass with like this really big piece of wood. So we had an absolute blast, and it was really great to see that not only the younger demographic can enjoy it, but the older can as well. Even myself, like, I absolutely loved it, and I can't wait to go again. So the supplies were very cheap, especially if you're going out as a family and you can share some of them, like the magnifying glasses and stuff, like literally a $5 activity that you can do all spring to fall and like see how everything changes. Like, I just, yeah, it's such a great activity, and I'm so excited that you can teach about that today, even though we were doing virtual, because it was, yeah, I've done it. It's so fun, and I can't wait to do more. So that's great. Thank you so much for talking today and for helping organize this. It's been an absolute blast.